Hello, this is Benjamin Fulford speaking on February the 13th, Friday the 13th, 2026. By now a critical mass of humanity is aware, Western civilization got hijacked by a satanic cult. And this goes back thousands of years, and this cult is in the process of being overthrown. Take a look at this event in Iran where they're burning an effigy of Baal to see what I'm talking about. Now, it's not just Iran. I mean, the whole world at this point is aware of the nature of this cult. And there is an international movement. I mean, the Chinese are fully aware of what they're dealing with now. So are the Russians, the Russian Orthodox Church, and a critical mass within the Western military-industrial complex, the intelligence agencies, understands that their top ranks have been compromised by this cult. Now, as the next step, let's see what Alexander Dugin, speaking for Russia, has to say about the situation.
Because of the Epstein lists, the West is collapsing right before our eyes. All the conspiracy theories have not merely been confirmed, they have far surpassed every previous version imaginable. The West has revealed itself as a demonic system of civilization, at the very center of which stands satanic, cannibalistic sects that devour children, traffic women, orchestrate provocations around the world, manipulate financial markets and political processes, and perform black masses. In other words, only a tiny handful of Western politicians remain untouched by the Epstein network. So what are ordinary people in the West supposed to do now? Previously, if they didn't like the Democrats, they'd vote for the Republicans. If the Republicans disappointed them, they'd switch to the Democrats. But now, who are they even supposed to vote for? And what are we to do now when humanity has adopted so many Western practices in education, when we've come to believe in their culture, when we remake their films, when we still rely on their financial instruments? The situation for the world, for history, for humanity itself is truly extraordinary. We are essentially living in a global state of emergency, an Ernstfall. No one any longer has guaranteed sovereignty. Law, rights, agreements, everything has been voided. And with elites tied to Epstein's island, that should come as no surprise. For them, there are no red lines at all. You see, this pedophilic satanic elite can simply decide that Putin is evil, or that the Iranians are evil, or that Xi Jinping is evil, and then launch a nuclear war that destroys humanity. By the way, Epstein himself funded the construction of bunkers for that very elite. If tensions continue to rise and the collapse truly accelerates, if social processes start slipping out of these elites' control, because people are now waking up to the fact that they are governed by pedophiles and Satanists in every party and every regime, with only rare exceptions. Russia and China have long spoken of the need for a multipolar world. We were ostracized and condemned for it, but now it is clear we were right. The West is the toxic core from which the rest of the world must escape, and a new, non-Western order must be built. In this historic moment, Russia and China have a unique opportunity to become the true beneficiaries of the total collapse of the entire Western system.
There can be no doubt that the current paradigm is collapsing, but the question is, what do we do about it? And the answer is not going to be easy. Last week, I was offered a huge amount of money by the Chinese to help rebuild the Western system, but I did not accept it because, first of all, who am I? Why should I be me? So instead, what we're going to have to do, and this is what has been negotiated behind the scenes, and we're hoping to make it happen, is we'll replace the blackmailed pedophile Keir Starmer as the Chancellor of the Prime Minister of the UK, and replace him with Nigel Farage, who's a genuine, talented individual. And at that point, we will call for a new Bretton Woods agreement. And so, in full public scrutiny, under full public scrutiny, we will work on replacing the current system. It's not going to be another secret thing where a document is passed and no, it's got to be done in public, and this is going to, be a big process. But what I think the conclusion is, and I remember when I first appeared to talk about this stuff on Jeff Rentz about 20 years ago, I said that if Jesus Christ was alive today, the first thing he would do would be to unplug the mainframes at the Federal Reserve Board. And I still think that is the truth. We don't want a system based on numbers put into computers that then control us through mathematical formulas. That's not how we want to manage our civilization. But that's what's happening. And I'll show you let's take a look now at the Pam Bondi hearings to show you what I mean. First, listen to California Representative Ted Lieu confront Bondi.
I love this.
I want to discuss another man, Donald Trump, who is all over the Epstein files, like former Prince. Here's a video. Like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those files
I'm reclaiming my time.
be
I got your
released.
answer. You said there's no
President
evidence.
Trump asked
Mr. Chairman,
that
please
they
stop the
sign
clock. Stop the clock.
the legislation. This is
Time.
this
I'd like
is
to
ridiculous.
reclaim my time.
Time belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you, here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was gonna stop a limo and hurt Donald Trump. And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide. No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately. Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized his operation. And as we say here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
So that, again, is the fake Trump, because there is a real Trump who's a very different individual who worked with the White Hats and who's not with, you have to understand that. It's like you have two different studios, each with their own Batman. We have two different studios, each with their own Trump. If you can't wrap your head around this, you're not going to figure out what's going on. Okay, in any case, the Epstein hearings in the U.S. government was mostly kabuki, in the sense that you didn't see names like Rockefeller or Rothschild appear. They didn't talk about children being tortured to death and this being filmed. Because they're trying to limit it, and they're most of them are involved on both sides. So that's why they're pulling their punches. Nonetheless, I think Representative Massey is not one of these individuals. Take a look at what he has to say.
Chairman, behind me I have 3 documents from the DOJ production that are emblematic of the massive failure of the DOJ to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. To my right is an email that was sent by the victim's lawyers to the DOJ. It was a list of names not to redact, a list of names not to release. What did the DOJ do with this email? They released this email in the document production. Literally the worst thing you could do to the survivors, you did. And they're getting phone calls. A lot of these people didn't want to be known. And we know you touched the document because you redacted one name and you redacted the lawyer's name, but you left the survivor's name there. The next document I want to show you, that was in the title, the victims' survivors' names, all right? The title of this one is Child Sex Trafficking, Co-Conspirators, fully redacted. And by the way, I'm going to unredact them here. Les Wexner is in this. Now, your your deputy attorney general said, oh, well, he appears hundreds of times in the files, but he doesn't appear in this file until I forced you to release it, where he's listed as a co-conspirator, not to tax evasion, but to child sex trafficking, not to prostitution, not to money laundering, child sex trafficking. And then finally, what we have here is the third exhibit that I have is emblematic of the FD 302 release. These are the documents that we need that you're holding on to and over-redacting because they have the names of the men who are implicated. How do we know? Because the survivors gave testimony to the FBI, and it's in there. And what happens when you go to the portal at the DOJ to look at what's behind this redaction? Another redaction. So we can't even see them. And then there's some of these files you've pulled down from the website that we will never see because we can't search the redactions. So
there you have the Department of Justice deliberately releasing the list of people who risk their lives to testify against these criminals while hiding the names of these criminals. And this shows you that they're all in cahoots. But more important is listen to Bondi's answer. She basically says, well, the Dow Jones is at $50,000.
The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making Americans safe. We should be talking about, what does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked. Are you kidding?
Mr. Jordan, Mr. Jordan.
Committee will be in order.
Mr. Jordan, am I going to get an extra 45 seconds added to my time?
The committee will be in order. The time belongs to the gentleman from Texas, Ms.
So, you know, they're saying, hey, look, okay, maybe we tortured and killed kids and stuff, but look, we've got this magic money machine, and we're going to, you know, pump up your 401ks with all this magic money. So why do you have to worry about, you know, kids being tortured to death? The thing is, though, their money machine is no longer affecting the real economy. They publish nothing but lies. For example, they recently published a jobs report that was supposed to be better than expected, 130,000 new jobs added, when in fact, if you take away the mathematical seasonal adjustment magic, you find that 2.65 million people became newly unemployed. So it's all falling apart, and their lies about the system are not going to work. And the other thing is that in order to guard their magic monetary system, they have been systematically murdering talented people. I was just reading about how they now show that Kurt Cobain of the band Nirvana was murdered. Well, he's just one of many. Bob Marley was murdered because he was a non-Khazarian, non-European leader. The same with Bruce Lee. He was murdered because, he was not part of their cult, and they don't like talented people who are not part of their cult. The same with President John F. Kennedy. He was a Catholic. He wasn't part of their group, so they killed him. Martin Luther King. They've been doing this systematically to try to stay in power, and that's why they really do need to face justice. And again, the alternative to this system is one that has been worked out through trial and error over hundreds of years. It started with Nazi Germany. Okay, never mind the Holocaust, which is a burnt offering to Satan of assimilated Jews by other, satanic Jews. Let's leave that part aside. Everyone got a Volkswagen. They built the Autobahn highway system. They had television, phones, all sorts of stuff brought to you without debt or taxes by having the government issue money. And they radically raised the standards of living, standard of living of the German people. Now, the same thing happened in Japan after World War II. They set up a system of future planning. They had an economic planning agency, and they had decades of double-digit growth. And until the system started being taken apart by the Khazarian mafia, after murdering countless prime ministers and bureaucrats and stuff. But by 1985, they had the highest standard of living on earth and the least gap between the rich and the poor in any of the OECD countries, the developed countries. And that system was taken apart. However, in the 1980s, or was it 70s, I think, Deng Xiaoping, the leader of China, went to Japan. He visited the founder of Panasonic, Matsushita Konosuke, and learned the system that had led to Japanese success. And that's what the Chinese have done. That's why, for example, in 2024, a single Chinese company produced more ships than the entire United States did in the 80 years after World War II. So what we're talking about is implementing an improved version of this system for economic management of the West, and then switching the Western civilization's long-term goal from creating a world capital in Jerusalem, killing 90% of humanity and enslaving the rest, to one of helping increase the amount and variety of life, including human life. That would be our long-term goal, but we would once again be the good guys. That's what we're fighting for, and that's why it has to be done in public with an international conference like Bretton Woods, so everybody's on board, or at least as many people as possible, so that we can accomplish the greatest good for the greatest number. That's what we're fighting for, but until the Chinese New Year's ends in March, we're going to watch this system continue to fall apart. And if I'm reading I read the comments in different sites, and basically, we're very close to all these people being dragged out of their houses and hung from the nearest lamppost. That's where it's getting to, so we better act quick. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself today. Now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers. There was one last thing I forgot to mention. We saw Elon Musk hallucinating about building giant AI factories on the moon. This is an example of how they've been taking their magic money and pumping it through people like him, but it's not really, producing the results. And he's freaking out because he's about to lose this magic money machine that makes him the so-called richest man on earth, when in fact, in normal business practice, he would have gone bankrupt a long time ago. Never mentioned being arrested for fraud, which is true of a lot of these people. Okay, now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hi Ben, we have our first question for today. What are your thoughts on the whole Epstein files and the quote code words? Do you believe these people were actually eating children when referring to quote jerky?
Yeah, no, there's ample proof that they tortured and ate children, drank their blood, and extracted their pineal glands. I have personally posted and seen a video of Hillary Clinton, Hitler, Rockefeller doing that to a 10-year-old girl together with Huma Abedin. They ripped the skin off her face. This is the sort of thing they do, and there's proof about it. The problem is that so far they have not faced justice. Next question.
Hi Ben, that being said, do you believe that Satan exists? You often talk about the world being run by Satanists. Do you believe that this is really a spiritual warfare and that there's some sort of benefit that these elites are getting by performing these rituals?
Well, they themselves actually believe that Satan is real, and if they do something like sacrifice a child, they will get a lot of money or power or something. But even if you don't have to invoke the supernatural. You can just think of it as a kind of a cultural phenomenon, a kind of a multi-generational group mind that functions as Satan. So, you don't have to bring in anything interdimensional, although that may well exist. It's just this collective group mind among very high level the elite that is the problem, and that can, you know, that can be defined as Satan. So yeah, Satan is real, and I believe Satan is now dead. Next question.
Hi Ben, could you elaborate on how you think we can pay off these massive debts without giving more money to the criminals who indebted us in the first place?
Yeah, we have to have a jubilee. That means we have to completely reboot the entire financial system, and then we start by inventorying the real stuff, you know, land and buildings and factories and gold and stuff like that, to come up with a new system that's actually controlled by the people and is you know, used for the people. So it's not a question of borrowing from these people again. No, we don't want debt slavery anymore. The whole thing will have to be rebooted, and that's why we need a big conference to work this out. This is not going to be done by a small group of people in secret. Next question.
Hi Ben, what are your thoughts on reptilians or shapeshifters? Do you think they exist? What about the videos of people with vertically long pupils or eyes changing in strange ways while on camera?
I haven't personally seen any evidence of this. I've met several of these people who are supposed to be reptilians, but I go with Occam's razor. I prefer to think of it as a metaphor that when these people who are normally, you know, nice, upstanding citizens suddenly like transform and start, you know, killing babies. So I think of it as a metaphor, and you know, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and I just haven't seen any real solid proof these reptilians exist, except for videos, which, as we all know, can be doctored. But certainly it works as a metaphor. Next question.
Hi Ben, we have our last question for today. There is a theory that people like Andrew Jackson, many former presidents, and their partners have never died but changed their identities throughout history, basically immortal. One example of this is that if you take a photo of Andrew Jackson and Jeffrey Epstein, as well as Andrew Jackson's wife and Ghislaine Maxwell, they look almost identical. Do you think that there's anything to these theories?
I don't know, but I'll be honest, they used to put out a picture that showed me looking like Benjamin Franklin. And I think that there's, I mean, we are part of a single genetic line going back, you know, from the beginning of life on Earth. And I think a lot of us inherit the mantle or try to, you know, inherit the spirit of these people. So because my name is Benjamin, when I was a kid, I read a lot about Benjamin Franklin. I admired him, and I tried to, you know, live a life similar to his. And I think that's what's going on. A lot of us, for example, admire President Jackson and wish to, you know, continue his work. But, you know, the faces are similar because we're all, you know, share the same genetics. But overall, I think this is something that needs more scientific study so we can get, you know, find out more about the real truth of this whole thing. But, you know, it's us as a species fighting over what we're going to, how we navigate into the future, and that's the real battle, and that is being multi-generational, and it's also spiritual. But I think the forces of light have finally won. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself today, and I hope to see you again next week.